Good insert time of day here. My full government name is Cheeseworth Ronald Reginald John Josh Steve Alucard McDude, and I live for the fake people I made up in my head. I used to make a webcomic about them, but then I discontinued it for reasons explained in this video here. If you don't feel like watching that right now, my basic summary is that A, I developed a chronic wrist injury, which prevented me from drawing for a while, B, I realized that prose was a better medium for me than comics, and C, I realized that I wasn't actually doing a very good job of writing a fantasy story anyway. I didn't give up on the story, but I am basically completely revamping it now. This video details a part of my revamping process, fixing my magic system. What was wrong with it, you may ask? Well, there was one very big problem with it that had less to do with the structure of the system itself and more to do with the way I was using it. Your magic system can be as cool and as in-depth and as complex as you want it to be, but you gotta actually integrate it into your world and your story in order to write good fantasy, in my opinion. There's no reason for it to exist otherwise. A magic system that doesn't affect the world and the story is just a vestigial piece of world building, the human tailbone of writing a story. This was the main problem that I had. I didn't spend enough time considering how the existence of this magic system would change the world and the way people within it live their lives, or even how my main characters might use it on a regular basis. And honestly, I think this does a huge disservice to the story in general. Since I've been reading more books, I've noticed that, personally, the main thing that draws me in as a reader before I find the world interesting, or before I even care about the characters, is the author's writing style and how they present the story. Basically, the most important thing for me in a book is whether the author is a good storyteller or not. Who would have thunk? But it's different for me when I'm the writer. When I'm the writer, I have to keep myself interested in the story before I can even start to worry about my audience, and I'm not going to be drawn in enough by my own prose and literary devices to keep trying to write an interesting story in a boring world. I'm pretty self-centered, but I'm not that self-centered. Therefore, it is imperative to me that I make the world an actually interesting place for the events of the story to occur in, and the characters to exist in. Especially because the world is basically the foundation on which the characters have to stand. Their lives, experiences, and beliefs are going to be shaped by it, so by neglecting my world building, I was kind of just leaving them floating in a soup of insufficient context, and fixing my magic system is the easiest way to start grounding them. Over the past few weeks, I have spent some time thinking about this problem, and I've made a few tweaks to my magic system and the world building that surrounds it in order to fix them. Before I go over these changes I made, though, I will first explain how the magic system works overall. My magic system is very scientific. I love it when wizards are basically just scientists, because if you think about it, in real life, scientists are basically just wizards. I also first created my magic system during a time in which I needed there to be a reason for everything. The questions of where does magic come from and why does it work were just as important to me at the time as, if not more important than, the how. The characters in the world don't necessarily have to understand every tiny detail of how everything in their world works, because that's just kind of unrealistic. I mean, we spent hundreds of years thinking that illnesses were caused by imbalances in 4 bodily humors before we even knew that things like bacteria and viruses existed, for Christ's sake. But I, as the author, do need to know every tiny detail of how the world works. For me, for my sake, it makes me feel better. So with that in mind, raw magic comes from the center of the Earth. In much the same way as the core of our Earth is made of hot magma, the core of the planet in which my story takes place is made of magic. The raw magic is extremely incomprehensibly powerful, like having a sun caged in the center of your planet, and it superheats the minerals that surround it into magma that cools progressively the closer it gets to the crust. Also, like a sun, raw magic emits very strong radiation. Magical radiation does not work the same way as nuclear radiation does, though, because of how it dilutes. Magical radiation works in a way where it sort of combines itself with the essence of whatever thing it's traveling through, becoming less explosively powerful and acquiring new properties as it travels. Almost none of the magic that makes it to the crust of the Earth is actually raw magic unless it's lucky enough to escape through volcanic explosions, rendering the area nearby basically unlivable, Chernobyl style. The principle of magical radiation is how this world develops elemental magic. Water, fire, the air, and minerals each have their own chemical makeup, and magic is a substance comprised of amalgams tinier than atoms. It infiltrates the empty spaces within atoms and molecules, and both are fundamentally changed by it. Not only does the radiation get weaker, but it now carries some of the properties of whatever thing it just passed through. Some atoms and molecules are, of course, denser than others, so magic has a much easier time passing through air or water than it does through solid rock. But the planet is billions of years old, so magic has long since had time to leak onto the surface in diluted elemental forms. Each living organism is also affected by magical radiation. However, radiation on the surface world is usually very weak compared to the power of raw magic, so the time it would take to actually infiltrate a person's body enough to create a new form of magic would be longer than most people actually live for. However, over time, most organisms, including humans, evolved a microscopic system of capillaries that allow the magic to infiltrate their bodies more quickly. Therefore, the vast majority of people in this setting can use magic in some way, and roughly 70% of people have a connection to a kind of elemental magic as well. Nobody can use more than one kind of elemental magic, and even most people who do not have elemental magic can still use illusions, which is basically just light manipulation. Illusions are kind of just like a human magic, a kind of magic that humans have evolved over millennia that once served as a hunting and survival tactic. Magical radiation begins to affect a person when they are developing in utero, so children will receive the power of illusion from the radiation coming from their mother's bodies, and a kind of elemental magic from their environments. This leads to wind magic being extremely common because it is everywhere, and to other types of magic being more or less common depending on your environment. If your mother lived in a forest while she was pregnant with you, for example, then you would be very likely to develop plant magic. Fire magic is the rarest kind of magic for this reason because there is no fire biome in nature. Parents will sometimes try to influence the type of magic their child will get by spending a lot of time in a specific area rich in that kind of magical energy, like inside a garden or near a fireplace. A person's elemental magic becomes a part of their body chemistry, and each kind of elemental magic has a consequence for overuse or improper use. For most kinds of magic, unsafe use means the channeling of the energy through one's body as opposed to a vessel like a wand, staff, or weapon of some variety. I will explain the specific circumstances for each element as well as the specific consequences and exceptions to this rule later on in the video. And I think that finally, covers all of the important information about the magic system. Now I shall progress to talk about the things I added to make the system feel more grounded in the actual world. So, the main issue with my world building surrounding this magic system, as I said before, was that I sort of forgot it existed. I wrote my fantasy world like it was just vaguely late Victorian Europe, but without all of the inconvenient parts of that society that I didn't care for or want to research. Minus the imperialism and the racism, because I did want to criticize that aspect. Buildings were supposedly built in the same way as they would have been in real life, trains worked the same way, etc. Magic didn't really affect the way people in my world lived their day-to-day lives or how they tackled problems. The first aspect of the world that I thought about in this regard was architecture, because I think architecture is cool. There are three kinds of elemental magic that could potentially be used to make structures: stone magic, plant magic, and water magic. How one could use stone magic for this is pretty obvious, I think. It would be just like that scene in Avatar when Toph gets mad at Katara and Earth bends a tent into existence to shut her out, only bigger and more complex. Early structures were probably similar to Toph's rock tent, simple, functional shapes, easy to set up, and structurally sound, but as societies changed and displays of status and beauty came to be expected, the structures would grow more complex. Entire mountains would be terraformed into palace cities over decades or centuries of craftsman work from stone magicians. And then when those inevitably collapsed during earthquakes, new structures would be rebuilt again out of the rubble. This kind of architecture would be most common on the continent of Nordastil, where the story is set, due to its many, many mountain ranges. Cheaper buildings would likely still be constructed in normal ways, though, with minimal magical assistance, while palaces and some churches would be entirely magicked into existence. I love this idea because it is still compatible with the real-world architectural styles that I still want to emulate because I think they're cool, but also provides a way for magic to affect society. Plant magic is used for architecture by deliberately shaping trees to provide shelter from the elements. This kind of architecture would not resemble real-world architecture very much at all, and would also likely be reserved for more important public buildings, property of wealthy people, and places of worship. Plant magic architecture would be common in heavily forested areas. The way that water magic is used for architecture is by creating palaces and huts of ice and snow. Ice palaces work for two reasons. Apparently it's actually quite hard to melt ice with just your body heat if the surrounding air is also cold, which it would be in any environment where you're even going to think about building an ice palace. And B, even if body heat did start to melt the ice, I added another thing to my magic system which negates that. Enter enchantments. Aside from stone magic, most things that can be done with magic are temporary, even with plant magic. Once you've shaped the tree into a house, there's nothing you can do to stop it from growing whatever way it wants, potentially making it rather difficult to live in unless you have somebody constantly working on it in order to keep it the way you want it. This is why enchantments are so important. They serve as a way to make certain magical alterations permanent. Enchantments can force a tree to grow into a certain shape, stop ice from melting, create a permanent gust of wind, or even suspend a piece of stone in open air. In the past, enchantments required a great deal of energy to be expended from a mage, a transfer of magical energy directly from their body to whatever object they were trying to enchant. They were an unstructured expression of a mage's raw intention, and thus they could not be very complex, nor were they very common. How long they would last was also somewhat unpredictable. I did say they were permanent, but I meant permanent in the way that blue hair dye is permanent. It's long-lasting, but it is going to fade eventually, and if you want to keep the color in, you have to redo it every now and then. However, the initial invention of the illuminated lexicon fixed many of these issues, and made enchantments much more common. The illuminated lexicon is a magical alphabet for structuring magical intentions. It was very rudimentary at the beginning, only containing symbols for very basic instructions, but quickly expanded to far more advanced ideas, allowing for huge technological advancements, including magic industrialization. Due to the illuminated lexicon, for example, trains in this world run on a set of automatically repeating magical instructions. They just need a human on board to replenish fuel when necessary, and they can theoretically run infinitely. The illuminated lexicon works because whenever a new symbol is made, a mage or team of mages enchants a stamp of that symbol, assigning meaning to it. That stamp can then be used to imbue the instructions onto an object that one intends to enchant, or to mark another stamp of the same symbol to replicate the tool. This way, runes can be mass-produced easily. A special kind of ink enchanted with water magic must be used, but even that can be produced fairly quickly because all ink can be enchanted with the same principle used for the runes. I'm pretty proud of this idea, even though it's fundamentally just runes, because it justifies the existence of an industrial revolution in my world, which is a fairly important part of the setting and contextualizes the story quite a bit. It also provides an important way for magic to affect the way that everyday people live their lives, which is the thing that I'm trying to do here most of all. But even without the illuminated lexicon, people would still definitely be using magic to accomplish everyday tasks and fulfill any needs they can. I would imagine that it's probably historically been a lot easier to feed large populations of people in this world because plant magic would make agriculture way, way easier. Even with the limitations of soil nutrients and whatnot being depleted by over-farming, having a plant magician in your farming community would definitely at least increase the crop yield and the health of the crops that come out. It would render farming incredibly efficient. Water magic could also greatly increase the efficiency of fishing and agriculture too. Things like water and wind magic would make sea travel a lot easier and more efficient. Having a team of water and wind magicians on your ship could save you from storms and keep you going at a quick pace even when there's no wind. Fire magic and water magic could easily be used for cooking too, and I imagine that fire magic and stone magic could be very useful for smithing. With fire magic, you could heat up the metal to exactly the right temperature, and with stone magic, you could easily find and remove impurities. I imagine that the use of magic for skilled trades like sailing, smithing, farming, fishing, and etc., the newer automated and mechanical use of it, and the use of magic for combat are probably considered three very different skills that a person could have. Just because you're good at fighting with your wind magic doesn't mean that you would be good at sailing with it, and it most certainly does not mean that you can use the illuminated lexicon to make enchantments with it. Just because you can fish really well with your water magic does not mean that you know how to fight with it, and just because you know how to use the Illuminated Lexicon does not mean that you know how to practically use magic. That sufficiently covers all of the changes I made to my magic system, but I also want to go over how my characters specifically will use it in the story, going in order of when each character would have been introduced in the comic. Which means we are starting with Celadon. Celadon is technically a plant magician. He's an empath, actually. A rare kind of plant magician that basically has a sixth sense for the emotions of every living thing within a certain physical radius of them. However, he was never really taught how to use his magic or how to deal with the fact that he can feel everybody else's frustration with him and disappointment in him constantly just by existing around him. This is partially because he's a prince, and in his country, plant magic is kind of seen as like a very unglamorous type of magic because it's mostly used in small agricultural towns and villages or by doctors and apothecaries to produce medicine. He doesn't really have reason to learn how to use plant magic because it isn't seen as socially profitable for his class, and he doesn't literally actually need to use it for his survival either. The other reason why he's as magically neglected as he is has to do with his dad not liking him very much and other more complicated reasons that are moderate spoilers. Despite not making much use of plant magic, Celadon uses illusions regularly, as most people in this world do. He uses them to light his way when he sneaks around his father's manor at night, to hide himself when he's in places he shouldn't be, and to read by in the dark. They are also applied to him by servants to make him look less sickly and miserable whenever he has to appear in front of the public or his extended family. These are all very common uses of illusions. Cosmetic illusions are almost more common than regular makeup in this world, but often aren't as convincing due to the slight glow they tend to give off. I mentioned earlier that it's considered unsafe to channel magic through one's body, and that elemental magic is part of a person's body chemistry, but plant magic is actually the exception to this rule. One cannot channel plant magic through one's body because it is more of a psychological connection than a physical one. A plant magician can feel the emotions and sensations that plants feel, and influence and communicate with them through this empathic connection. As a result, the consequences of overuse are psychological as well. Plant magicians are more prone to mental illness, particularly anxiety, depression, and in severe cases, psychosis, which can be temporary or chronic depending on the circumstances. Extremely powerful plant magicians are often born as empaths. The heightened prevalence of mental illness that exists among all plant magicians is doubly true among empaths, who are often stereotyped as being highly neurotic and eccentric individuals as a result. Celadon is an empath, which is part of why he is so miserable, but he does not experience any kind of hallucinations, at least not under normal circumstances. You may have thought that this was what was going on in pages like this, if you read my comic, but this is actually just a very confusing visual metaphor to show how it feels for him to experience other people's emotions all the time. Next, Marigold is going to be a little bit different from my other characters in that he is a null, meaning that he cannot use magic at all, not even illusions. Therefore, I will use his section to explain what is going on with him and the wider implications of his condition. Marigold's condition is caused by closed or otherwise non-functional capillaries, a non-heritable mutation that occurs in roughly 1 to 2% of the population. I didn't mention it before because I'm trying to keep the script fairly concise, but not being affected by magical radiation actually has very heavy consequences on people in this world because magical radiation causes the average person to age very slowly throughout their life. It's not very noticeable as a child or teenager, but being 60 is the equivalent to being like 26 for most of my characters. For Marigold, being 60 years old will be the equivalent to being 60 years old. Gnolls live a normal human lifestyle of about 70 to 100 years depending on lifestyle, genetics, and luck. But this is considered to be tragically short because everyone else is out there living multiple hundreds of years before they get old and die. As a result of their shorter lifespans and their complete lack of magic, gnolls are considered to be cursed in some cultures, including the culture Marigold was brought up in. Marigold was born to noble parents in the country of Septent, who were very concerned with their reputation. His father was born and raised in Septent under the Septentrian religion, which believes that magic is a gift given to humanity by the creator of the universe, leading to the superstition that gnolls are somehow unholy or touched by evil. Marigold's mother, meanwhile, is from a highly respected family in the country of Beck, which has a somewhat shaky alliance with Septent. His parents' marriage is political, and though it is not unhappy, They had to be very conscious about their image. Therefore, when their firstborn son turned out to be a gnoll, they quietly hid his existence from the public and had a bunch of other children to replace him. Marigold's father wanted to send him away to an orphanage, but his mother thought that would be too cruel, so they hid him in their house until he was 16 years old, an age at which his father thought would be okay to kick him out with no money to his name and no proof of where he came from. This actually is how he ends up in the story in the first place. Leona uses wind magic, as you might have inferred from this illustration of her in my last video. She is not formally trained, but has been practicing for a long time all by her lonesome. She is something of a survivalist, voluntarily living alone in the wilderness for the warmer part of the year because she prefers to avoid people. As such, she uses her magic to help herself survive. She uses wind magic and illusions to hunt, confusing small prey so that she can trap them more easily. She also uses the same techniques against potentially dangerous or aggressive animals to make it easier for her to get away from them. Very powerful and skilled wind mages often have heightened senses of smell and hearing, which is often used for tracking. But Leona is not among these individuals, so she has to subsist on her normal human senses and can't really use her magic for tracking potential food. Leona is also a thrill seeker who enjoys putting her life at risk because it's the only activity that makes her feel anything anymore. She uses wind magic to jump off of very high places without worrying about all of the bones she would break if she didn't have the ability to just stop falling at any moment. Wind magic is also useful for increasing her agility. Using it, she can run faster, jump higher, and land more softly than a person without it could. Gravity is basically optional for her. Leona does not follow the best practices for magic safety. For Leona, the consequence of this is that she has definitely given herself oxygen toxicity several times and has just happened to be lucky enough to recover from it each time without lasting damage because the toxicity was mild. This is a common consequence for wind mages who channel their magic unsafely. Fuchsia, Celadon's evil girl failure twin sister, is a fire magician. Like her brother, she does not use her magic very much, but she did receive training for it because unlike plant magic, fire magic can be extremely dangerous if the person using it doesn't know how to control it. The thing about magic being a part of a person's body chemistry is especially true for fire magicians. They have a higher resting body temperature than other people, which makes them more at risk from fevers, which can actually be caused by the improper use of their magic alongside internal as well as external burns. It is absolutely vital that fire mages take safety seriously. Anyways, I joke that Fuchsia is their dad's favorite child, and while it is a little bit more complicated than that, he did teach her all about his favorite things: war and violence. As a result, Fuchsia loves her swords, and she is pretty good at using them. However, after an unspecified event in which she committed unspecified actions, she is now terrified of blood. That is a problem because swords are a pretty good instrument for getting blood out of a person's body and all over everything else in sight. So Fuchsia uses her magic to heat up her swords, which are made of a very expensive enchanted metal that doesn't use its shape when heated, to the point where they cauterize wounds instantly. And that's about the only thing she actually uses her magic for. Violet here is a water mage. She is unusually powerful and skilled for her age, and she would love to use her magic for things like creating ice sculptures or interpretive dance or something fun, creative, morally uncomplicated, and non-violent like that. Unfortunately for her, she was conscripted against her will by the Septentrian military and now has to use her gifts to serve her country as basically a child soldier. Because she is mainly a scout, this mostly means that she uses her magic to restrain prisoners and for crowd control during fights. Because water magic has a much flowier, looser feel to it than, say, stone magic does, Violet prefers to use a streamer as her vessel because it feels the most natural to her. If she ever didn't use her vessel, then she would be at high risk for developing water toxicity. However, aside from that, water magicians are especially adaptable to survival in many different kinds of extreme conditions and situations because they tend to retain water more easily than others, and because skilled water magicians have the ability to sense water under the ground, pull water from the environment, and even control their own body temperature to an extent. Lastly, this guy, Zeren, is first and foremost a mechanic and an engineer. How did he get to be a mechanic and an engineer at his age, you ask? Well, Zeren is good at one particular thing, and that thing is math. He is extremely conventionally intelligent in general, but his main talent is in math. His home country of Naazhiewa has a bit of a class inequality problem that he was not at the privileged end of, but his parents obviously noticed that he had a lot of potential, and they spent a ton of money that they didn't really have on sending him to school, which led to a chain of very unlikely events that led to him graduating in an overseas septentrian university at the age of 16 with an engineering certificate and being trapped in the country until he can pay off all of his student loan debt. Seiren is technically a stone magician, but he's another character that doesn't use his elemental magic very often. Mostly he sticks to illusions and the illuminated lexicon. Most modern technology relies on the illuminated lexicon to work, so as an engineer he is pretty good at using it. He frequently uses it to repair the faulty military vehicle he drives as a part of his job. When he was younger and still full of hope for his future, he used to experiment with the runes and try to invent new uses, but he hasn't had the time for that sort of thing in years. If Seiren did use his stone magic and used it unsafely, then he wouldn't actually be likely to receive immediate consequences in the way of a fire mage or a wind mage, but it would put him at significant risk for developing problems later in life, such as irregular bone growths, tooth decay, or bone loss. There are a few very rare cases in which unsafe overuse of stone magic led people to develop that disease that makes your muscles and tendons turn into bone, slowly immobilizing you over time until you die. Healthy people with stone magic, however, tend to have high bone density as well as a slightly lower metabolism than the average person. With all of that, I should have covered the functioning of my magic system, as well as the changes I made to it and the way it is used by each of my main characters. This video was actually a lot easier to make than I thought it would be because I didn't need to make quite as many changes as I thought I would. It was mostly a thought exercise in how to apply what was already there, which was really what I was bad at before, honestly. Nonetheless, I hope you found my yapinations about my story interesting and that my voice wasn't too annoying. I am not sure when the next videos will be coming, as those will probably concern a renovation of my cultural world building, which is a much more fraught subject than magic systems and requires me to do significantly more research than the 1.5 Google searches I had to do for this video. Also, I really want to say thank you for the response to my previous video. I was not at all expecting it to do as well as it did, or to get 40 subscribers from my first video. I know that's not really, a lot, at all, and this kind of response is usually reserved for people whose popularity just exploded in the figures of thousands and not tens, but I was genuinely expecting that video to plateau at 50 views and to maybe get 2 or 3 subscribers out of it if I was lucky, so suffice it to say I am both very surprised and very grateful. It's crazy to me that there were that many people who were not only willing to listen to me talk about myself and my project for 15 minutes, but that some of you signed up to do it again by subscribing to me. Also, I'm sorry if the quality of this video is a bit sloppy. I recorded it in my room while my fan was on, and I am not sure how that affected the way my voice and audio sound in it. And I also couldn't figure out how to make my mic work, so I've just been using my earphones again. I'm off script right now. If you can't tell, I'm terrible at talking off script and on script. Also, there's a lot of mistakes in here because I really rushed recording the audio because I was about to go on a big, huge trip, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to record audio while I was on that trip, and I didn't want to have to wait until I got back to finish the video, so there are many mistakes in here, and I think that, frankly, the script could have used a couple more revisions, but in the future I will try to make the future videos better and not to make as many mistakes and to revise my script more carefully. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later.